Welcome everyone to another Money on Chain Talks with Sato. We're going live from our YouTube channel and our Twitter account, Money on Chain. Okay, my name is Luis, also known as Crypto Luis, and today we have a very special guest, which is Juan Galt, a friend of the house. And while we're waiting for him, we invite you to follow us on Twitter as Money on Chain OK, and our Telegram channel as well, which is Money on Chain Community. You can find it just like that, telegram.com/Money on Chain Community. In there, we attend your questions. We give you help about using our protocol. And for those who might not know, Money on Chain is a stablecoin protocol, a stablecoin backed in Bitcoin, which is DOC. And we are committed to bring DeFi into Bitcoin through the Roosstock sidechain. So now our guest is just getting into the studio. We're going to let him in and just start this. Hey, Juan, welcome.
How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, hang on. Go ahead. I'll just have to go like this. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's good?
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome. Great. Are we live?
Yeah, we're live now.
Awesome.
We try to plan ahead all the streams, but this is a very natural conversation. All of our guests are free to, take the conversation wherever
Hang on a second.
Whatever they like, and we try to do it in a very natural way. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Juan?
Yeah, just give me a second. Sorry.
Okay.
Something's playing in the background is screwing me up. Okay. Apologies for that. Live technical issues, but it's all good and well. Let's get into it.
Well, we are at it. So how can we start this? I'm just having my morning coffee here in El Salvador. Where you at right now, if you can say?
I'm in Colombia. I'm in the coffee zones of Colombia, enjoying, getting away from the city a little bit.
So definitely in El Salvador and Colombia, we have good coffee. Mm-hmm. So we are good today with that. So for our guests, we would like you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then we can move on today's topic.
Sure. So my name is Juan Galt. I've been doing media and reporting in Bitcoin for about 10 years, which is crazy to say. And I have a podcast. We do 1 or 2 shows a week, every week with bitcoinnews.com, interviewing people that are either thought leaders or entrepreneurs or developers pushing the edges of the Bitcoin world. And I love it. It's a great time.
So what's your professional background? Are you a journalist? Because I saw that you have a lot of experience with these media outlets such as Bitcoin News, and you have been a collaborator with Bitcoin Magazine and other websites. So what brought you to Bitcoin reporting?
So from a university perspective, I'm a social worker. So I'm over here, giving people Bitcoin therapy, right? But professionally, I just started as a journalist and then started kind of trading and doing like a lot of Bitcoin finance stuff. So, I never really practiced social work. So yeah, I'm basically like a media guy. I'm basically a reporter and a trader. Like most of my the little money that I've made has been from trading. It hasn't actually been from media, but most of the time I spent actually doing media because I enjoy the conversations and I enjoy writing and I enjoy the sort of communication aspect of it.
I like that, and I always tell people that when journalists journalism started being a profession or an occupation, they started as chronists or writers for the common things happening in little towns in the cities. They were more like storytellers, and they came from different backgrounds, and they had this storytelling thing as a hobby. So they developed these communication skills on the way of telling stories. So I like to encourage people that want to tell stories that go ahead. Like, you don't need to be a licensed communicator from a university to tell stories and to do a good job, you know.
You just need to be
Um,
a good communicator. You need to study the art of communication.
yeah, of
But
course.
you don't need a license. You don't need a
Mhm.
certificate. Yeah.
Yeah, in the end, well, if you think about a social worker, you work with people that have different needs, different situations, and you certainly need to be a very efficient communicator to be able to talk with these people with different backgrounds and different necessities. I mean, if you are doing some kind of beneficency or social work, you have to have this empathy and
Mhm.
being able to comprehend what are people needs and all that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's cool. I mean, you notice this your work with an affinity with psychology and philosophy and finance as well. Maybe you're a jack of all trades.
Yeah, and a master of none, which is the trick to that.
But I'm sure that you have been able to onboard a lot of people into Bitcoin and as a consultant, as an advisor. Um, and it's I'm curious about it. Like, and this will take us to the today's discussion. Like, as a reporter, you have been able to know people from different backgrounds, different origins, with different stories. So that maybe have allowed yourself to I mean, mentally construct Bitcoin narratives and get exposure to these social narratives happening around Bitcoin, the conceptions and misconceptions as well.
Mhm.
So that's when I want to move on today's discussion, because currently, in the modernity of the of the Bitcoin discussions and debates, a lot of older narratives are being challenged or being, yeah,
Questions. Yeah.
challenged. So there's a lot of things happening right now regarding self custody and privacy and what's the future of Bitcoin. Um, if it's a medium of exchange or of store of value,
Hmm.
all that is happening in different levels. I mean, if Bitcoin is gonna be the coin or a tool for the retail markets or for the or of the big investment funds and all that. So many people have afraid that someone is going to capture Bitcoin and it's gonna, it, you know, they're gonna exclude the base users, the retail users. So I want to dive into these myths and these narratives that we are seeing today,
Yeah.
especially with all that's happening with the high fees environment
Hmm.
and the solutions that are being developed right now, such as the side chains and L2s and the current state of Lightning. So there's a lot of things to discuss today. But
Yeah.
um, I've seen you on Twitter, like sharing your thoughts with different people. So I would like to know, what are you following right now in this regard? What captured your attention? What worries you? And
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm following a lot of things, and the thing is, the problem is that there's a lot of different perspectives on them, right? So I made a tweet that's kind of getting some attention, and it's somewhat controversial, but got a lot of likes, which is basically saying that the Bitcoin maximalism that I remember, the one that I adopted in a sense, and I think it actually comes from Andres Antonopoulos, was the idea that Bitcoin would be able to integrate whatever innovation came from the shit coins, right? From the
Hmm.
99% of garbage that's in the market. That 1%, 2% that actually innovates, we would be able to actually integrate it into Bitcoin. And therefore, that was one of the reasons Bitcoin was the greatest, because it had the network effect and it had the right fundamentals, the right genesis story. It was built with pure intentions. It was the most paranoid, and so it's the highest security, the safest, right? So that was the sort of story that I was told, and I believed it, and I think it's true enough. But now we're entering a point where ossification is kind of coming, and it's coming either through like a dominant culture of resisting any kind of, let's say, upgrades to Bitcoin, or a culture of a fragmented culture that doesn't let any changes actually enter Bitcoin. It's one of those two. And and I don't know if we can build consensus on things that are not like mission critical anymore. That's the question that I was sort of tackling. And but a lot of people seem to have taken my post as being sort of like pro, let's say, ordinals, or pro,
Yeah,
a lot of this
that
right.
happens a lot. That happens a lot whenever one raises a question about all this. They, I don't know, these random accounts from Maxis tend you to position you on one side of the
Yeah,
debate, and that's not the case.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's part of the question, is how do we get clarity on that. And the reason I call myself a street philosopher. I think the goal of a philosopher is to bring clarity to conversations.
Hmm.
um and so that's kind of what I'm trying to do, trying to like clarify what's going on. I think there's a lot of words that are like, they have double meanings, right? I think the word mix maximalism has like way too many meanings, right? So what are we maximalizing? What is it that we're trying to maximize here? And one of my concerns is that if I was like a puppet master, like if I was sitting in the Council of Foreign Relations or something like that, right? If I was like in some think tank thinking, how do we co-opt, how do we manipulate, how do we damage Bitcoin, how do we weaken Bitcoin? I think the way you do it is you maximize the sort of number go up narrative, and you minimize and suppress the other dimensions. And I think what's sort of becoming obvious is that, you know, like again, like I think Sailor, like I like Sailor quite a bit. I'm actually a big fan of Sailor. I think he's brilliant. But there's like a shadow version of Sailor, and the shadow version of Sailor is, he's a rich American with first world banking, MIT sort of, rich kid student, brilliant engineer that doesn't need Bitcoin for anything, but just wants to be super rich, and therefore is maximizing the number go up, the price expansion. It doesn't actually care. In fact, is concerned about the risk that comes from the other dimensions of Bitcoin, which is medium of exchange and potentially eventually unit of account. And he thinks unit of account is like decades away, which I agree with. It probably is decades away. But medium of exchange is not that interesting to him. In fact, he kind of talks it down, right?
Hmm.
And I think if without medium of exchange, Bitcoin becomes captured. I think without medium of exchange, Bitcoin becomes a pet rock. It's if it's not affordable to move Bitcoin out of the exchanges, if it's not affordable, or it's just there's no implementation of things like the Lightning Network in exchanges, then then it'll become too expensive for normal people to move their coins out of exchanges, and we become a banking system again. And it may just be that this isn't like some sort of big conspiracy to take over Bitcoin, that it's just like we're running into like the hard limits of computer science here. We don't know how to scale Bitcoin without giving up self custody or making critical compromises, right? If you look at some of the other chains, they've the big blockchains, that forked off Bitcoin, they're all worthless. And why? Well, they can argue that, we sort of, we in Blockstream took over the brand, okay, but also nobody cares about their coin because their coin is changing too much, doesn't have that store value aspect. So store value is fundamental, you know. And but then you look at something like Ethereum, which like with like 12-second block times, 2 MB blocks, and their fees are $16 plus $18, $20 to do anything. You look at Solana, which is like even bigger blocks, even more throughput, and they're having a hard time. They're getting congestion issues, right? So it doesn't seem like block size increase actually changes anything really over the long term. So maybe we're hitting into its limits, and then people are just trying to cope with those limits. I don't know. So I mean, I think there's truth to that, but I also think that it would be great if we could actually actualize Bitcoin, actually bring some of that innovation that has come over the past 15 years of this industry. We could sort of bring that in, and the thing is, like the core developers are very they're very risk averse, and the risk averse not out of some sense of virtue. They're risk averse because their jobs are on the line. They don't want to step in the middle of a consensus war and
Hmm.
get flamed, you know. And because there's so few of them, and because the Bitcoin maximalists, or not even the plebs, the Bitcoin Twitter crowd, or let's say the Bitcoin activists, are so loud and often so aggressive, they're kind of a capture audience. They're sort of like, a lot of them are just not willing to step in the line anymore. And so they're doing a lot of like maintenance stuff around Bitcoin that is in consensus, and that's good. That needs to be done. But then consensus thinks that, like, that would improve things like the Lightning Network, right? They take a long time and they're very difficult, right? And maybe it just takes time, and maybe we're just impatient and bored. That's also like, I think, actually a valid narrative. But I think I'm worried that if we reach a level of adoption that's too large for consensus to reach, then we're just going to be stuck with the Bitcoin that we have. And if we stuck with the Bitcoin that we have, then self custody is going to become increasingly expensive. Probably it's going to get priced out, and probably we end up in a world where we have to use Bitcoin, like eCash Bitcoin banks, to transact in Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Don't
I
think
think
it
that.
takes long. I mean, it was the first thing Hal Finney said, or the second thing Hal Finney said. So maybe it was just inevitable, but that's the thing that I kind of would like to avoid. I like self custody. I think that's one of the key benefits and utility of Bitcoin. And without self custody, I think Bitcoin becomes. I mean, I'll still use it, but it'll be less interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree, but I think that so many things are happening right now regarding the developing of these solutions. They are unavoidable. I mean, but the thing that we must avoid is that make one of these solutions predominant. I mean, Bitcoin couldn't be or can be completely banked, based on bank-like services, like the ones you were mentioned with eCash and Mint federations, or completely federated sidechains and all that stuff. I mean, that can, for me, ideally, that can be the whole reality of Bitcoin usage. For me, it lose the the whole purpose when you sacrifice self custody and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, but on the other half, all these solutions brings trade off
Hmm.
in the end. That
Hmm.
there's not. I was reading to Adam Back the other day, and he was saying like there's no such thing as free lunch. I mean,
Yeah.
for all these solutions to be working efficiently and scale on time, you need to sacrifice some things
Yeah.
that you earned before. So that's the dilemma that's there. And I think the best thing to do is to try to build um, or to strengthen the self custody and all these basic values of Bitcoin in a more efficient way than the other solutions that are being built right now. I mean, of course, if you have people like Michael Saylor saying that the store of value is more important or more valuable than the medium of exchange, um, he's gonna put his money when where his mouth is.
Hmm.
So these projects that prioritize medium store of value use case of bitcoins, they're gonna receive more money, more support. Even culturally, they're gonna be more supported. And I think that's what you are referring to when you say that this lousy crowd in Twitter that they're doing. Um, they, they seem to be following these influential voices about that aspects of the Bitcoin usage and forgetting, I mean, the ones that are trying to build or keep Bitcoin sovereign or they are maximalists in a way that they prioritize the monetary use cases and self custody use cases. They are not as loud as this other crowd. So maybe they are building in silence. So
Hmm.
um, I think that for all these people that are traditionally less loud than the others, they need to step in and express themselves and raise their voice about it because otherwise the
Hmm.
I think the newcomers on and the new Bitcoiners that will come for the years ahead, they are not going to be able to access to this knowledge and these ways of thinking. I mean, they're going to know a version of Bitcoin that is based on the narratives built by the stronger ones or the louder ones. So yeah, regarding the Bitcoin shitcoinization, I mean, I'm a monetary maximalist in the way that I prefer to keep Bitcoin how it is and with what were the original use cases and with the original values. I'm not afraid of ossification because I think Bitcoin could work this way for a long time. And of course, you can avoid to do software maintenance and do some tweaks here and there to make more things efficient inside of the software. But I think that you should avoid do deep changes into the Bitcoin software. I mean, that I think that's the right approach for any product manager or engineer or developer.
Hmm.
Um, and the thing with taking risks is that you don't know how wise it is to taking risk until the things that you do finally success.
Hmm.
That's the thing with the risk taking persons that everybody nobody trusts them when they make these assumptions about okay, this is the vision I have for the product I'm building or the things I'm trying to do. Nobody trusts them, but finally when they success, everybody trusts them.
Hmm.
So it's hard to prove that these risk taking measures and things are
Hmm.
going to be successful, and if they're not, you are going to end up damaging the Bitcoin protocol.
Yeah,
So
so I mean, I think that's an interesting
the cost is too
line of
high.
thought. Yeah, no, that's an interesting line of thought on the topic of ossification because you're right. It's hard to prove the value of a software upgrade to Bitcoin, and I'm not talking about hard forks. I'm never talking about hard forks. I think the only area where a hard fork is like everybody needs to upgrade. The only area where that makes any sense is if like there's a critical bug that's like game changing, right? Like some inflation bug, some issue
Mhm,
with the cryptography, something really bad. That could
mhm,
happen, and we need to be able to adapt to that. And if we can't, we're gonna have problems, and people are just gonna upgrade. A lot of the industry is just gonna upgrade, and like whoever gets forked off, too fucking bad, right? If that does come, and there are like bugs that we know of that are on like a timer that maybe we are gonna need to upgrade in like 20 years or something, no matter what. Maybe that's what I've heard. I'm not an engineer at the level that I can understand that, right? So um Now there's another version of upgrades, which is the soft forks. Soft forks are like not everybody has to upgrade, but if enough people upgrade and enough miners upgrade, then the feature gets implemented, integrated into Bitcoin, and that's how Segwit and Taproot got implemented through soft forks, right? So it's basically like you get an economic consensus, you get an economic majority and a minor majority to reach consensus on a new, let's say, a new rule for Bitcoin, and but it's a rule that it's not, that it's backwards compatible. So people that don't like the rule, they can still run the old version of the nodes, and they are not forked off the network. That's a soft fork.
Yeah, but
So so
the thing,
so
excuse me,
so
I
so,
interrupt.
so, so with Segwit and Taproot, Segwit and Taproot were huge upgrades. They were
Mhm.
like big, a lot of code, plenty of code. So people have said that Taproot was like replacing the engine in the cryptography of Bitcoin. It was adding a whole new cryptographic primitive. Like Taproot was pretty big, and Segwit was pretty big too. The things that we're talking about today in Bitcoin are way smaller, way tighter. Like we're talking about CTV. CTV is very, very small. Now there's other things being talked about, but compared to those, the conversations that are being had about around softwares today are way, way smaller in terms of complexity. So I think it's important to kind of put a context in that. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say it was that you can make little changes in the protocol code, in the software code, but the consequence could be bigger. And
Yeah.
that's my issue, particularly with Taproot. And now that you say it with CTV,
Hmm.
in the case of Taproot, it was that it was it had an unforeseen consequence with all these inscriptions thing and this new reality that has grown up from Taproot and all the innovations they did. So that wasn't. I mean, it was possible to inscript data in Bitcoin maybe since the
Hmm.
beginning of this,
Certainly, yeah.
but Taproot maybe accelerated this new form of inscripting data into the Bitcoin
Hmm.
blockchain. So that I don't think that Taproot developers, they didn't predicted that, you know. And with the
Well,
case,
actually, some of them were aware of the issue. Apparently, like there's been some posts of developers. HAL was talking about, like, this was a bug that was like talked about. It just wasn't popularized. I don't know exactly what the conversations were. It's kind of hard to go back into time and try to get their perspectives on it. I think they just didn't think that it was going to be an issue, or maybe they didn't think it was an issue, right? I There is definitely like a sort of hacking sort of mindset and culture within the ordinals people that is sort of using these software and like using it for whatever they want to use it, not for its intended purpose. And that's like to be expected in a decentralized network, right? I think that sort of, I actually kind of respect that spirit. If we can't reach any consensus about Bitcoin, then and we have to like basically hack Bitcoin, so to speak. Not hack it in the sense of like damage it,
mhm,
but like hack it in the
mhm,
sense of like use it for our intents, even if the tools built into Bitcoin aren't designed for that. And we need to hack self custody scaling into Bitcoin, then I'm okay with that, for example, right?
mhm,
Like if we have to do like weird, convoluted things, and this is what mostly core developers do anyway. It's like they're like, well, we have to assume that we can't reach consensus on it, like reach consensus about consensus changing things. Therefore, let's grab what we have and like build something with it. And yeah, but I mean, I think, yeah. So
so,
it's, I think, and Seg would also introduce stuff that the ordinals guys are using.
I
So I
mean,
don't know
whenever
if there's a way to stop it. There is no such a thing as a perfect upgrade.
no, no, there's no, and the thing is that you can't predict what the what are the other people are going to do with the upgrade you did. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it's all about, to discover it, to discover the hack. You work around an upgrade or any Bitcoin feature,
Hmm.
and you work around it and bring out new solutions or new features or
Right.
whatever. So the creator of these upgrades are not able to see that into the future.
I mean,
Then other
there's
things will
levels,
come.
there's standards, right? Like we can't, if like by that standard, by that logic, then there's just nothing we can ever do to Bitcoin again because it could have some terrible unforeseen consequence, and therefore let's just let it ossify. The problem is ossification is dangerous, right? There's two kinds of
But
ossification as far as I
yeah, well,
know. There's
please
like
explain.
consensus ossification, and then there's
Mhm,
non-consensus, right? So non-consensus code is things like if you look at Bitcoin Knots, which Luke Jr. runs, Bitcoin
mhm,
Knots has patched the bug that ordinals are exploiting, and that's a bug in the mempool policy. So if you run not Bitcoin Knots, you won't be relaying a lot of the ordinal stuff, right? But that doesn't
mhm,
change consensus. Consensus is like the language, and then non-consensus is like slang, around the core of the language, right? So, I think Bitcoin needs to continue to like Bitcoin needs to stay alive in the sense that like it needs to be able to adapt to new things. It's an organism in the sorts because it is on top of us. It is a sort of it is emergent from humans, and humans are alive, and humans are creative, and we can come up with random shit and like
mhm.
viruses and ways to fuck with things. And the space of the surface of potential things that can be launched at Bitcoin is probably infinite. And so I think Bitcoin needs to stay alive enough to adapt to new threats. Otherwise, like my concern is that ossification means fragility, right? And
Okay.
we don't like
Yeah,
fragility. Fragility is a
I,
bad
I
thing.
will I would like you to explain what is exactly ossification because I use it to understand it as making Bitcoin useless or maybe
Right.
to like how would you say it in English is like well
No.
I forgot the word but like useless like an antique. Like,
No. Ossification, no. Ossification means that it's too hard to change, and it's good enough that we don't really need to go in there and change it. So it's like the layer one of the internet, IPv1 or whatever, right? That stuff doesn't get changed anymore. Not very well. Very like as far as I know, it hasn't been changed in like a decade or two, right? Like it just was designed well enough and updated enough in the early days, and then adopted so widely that people are just like, well, yeah, it would be great to be able to make it IPv6 and like I get better encryption in there and this and that, but it's just impossible. So we just have to get a new layer of adoption on top of it that fixes the things that it's missing, right? That's ossification. Ossification, it's like it's good enough that it gets mass adoption, but it's still missing some things that would be great to have for certain niches and certain like important use cases, right? And so that's the question with Bitcoin is like ossification would be like it just we can't upgrade it anymore. It's good enough in theory, but we can't upgrade it anymore. And I don't know that and I think there's an extreme version of ossification that would be like we just don't make any changes to it. But I don't think that's ever gonna happen because again, like if a critical bug, like if something like an inflation bug is discovered that needs to get patched, it's gonna get patched. So, so everybody's gonna have to upgrade. Like if you're running a node and something like that happens, you're off the chain, bro. You're on a different version of Bitcoin.
yeah, but
Well,
I
that'll happen.
this
So I don't think we'll reach that radical form of ossification, but but we might very well reach a point where we may very well be at the point where we just can't ever have another software upgrade, for example.
but I think that in this case you could apply something like the Lindy effect for Bitcoin. I don't know if you have heard about that.
I have, but maybe explain it. Yeah.
But it's basically like the longer an artifact or a technology is well established and works and is functional, the longer its life expectancy or is.
Mhm.
So I think that the chances for Bitcoin to be uh, useless or ossified they are less the longer the time is is being used and stable and functional.
Yo,
So
I'm not saying useless.
chances, the
Definitely,
chances that
ossification doesn't mean useless. Ossification
I
just
go,
means like slow to adapt or difficult to change. Yeah,
okay, but I mean, what I say is like, for example, taking your comment, the chances of discovering an inflation bug into Bitcoin are less as the times go pass by. It's
sure,
the probability to find an inflation bug is are less.
sure.
Are for so that's what I mean with the Lindy effect applied to Bitcoin. Like you will have less need to change Bitcoin as the longer the time it functions.
That's
Bitcoin has.
statistically maybe true, but statistics are snaky. Like statistics don't are not cumulative, right? Like you don't just because you had you know you roll the six every
Well,
time
this is
10 times in a row doesn't mean that your likelihood of rolling the six again is higher. You still have six times. The dice still has six sides, right? So there's still always a chance. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we've engineered Bitcoin well enough that there's just no inflation bugs left. That's possible. I don't know.
I mean, this is like a probability theory.
Yeah.
Like the longer you don't you use, the longer you use a thing or a technology, the less you need to change it.
I mean, okay, I hear you on that. I don't know that I believe that. That it might be like true in general, but
Maybe you
I
can
don't
do
know
it
that it's
better.
that useful
Maybe
for anything.
they will have ways to improve it and make it better and add things, of course. But it's talking about the need of you for to change it for continue that life of the technology or the tool.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think if a tool survives its early stages, then yeah, it survives the most difficult challenges. So its likelihood of survival increases, right? But doesn't mean that there isn't something that could kill it. So it
Well,
might
that
increase the odds. Yeah.
yeah. So again, with dosification, you will say that it's like this. You don't need to change the protocol. That's what you mean with dosification.
Well, that's what people mean. It's not even that you don't need it, it's that it's not doable. It's not feasible. It's not possible. Like it's too difficult, it's too
Okay.
expensive, right? There's too much resistance. People don't care. You can't convince enough
Mm.
people to upgrade. That's ossification.
So yeah, I think that, well, I was going to talk to you about OPSI TV. I mean,
Hmm.
maybe you can make a small change to the protocol, but the consequence of making OPSI TV transactions could bring a lot of risk. I mean,
I mean, so
in
that's
this,
the thing. Opsi TV, like, I'm not an expert in it, but I've interviewed a lot of people about it. Opsi TV has been in open source for like 6, 7 years. People have been talking about it forever. Like the main opposition to Opsi TV at this point is not that it's too risky; it's that it might not be flexible enough. That it might be too thin. So like a lot of the softworks
hmm,
that are like APO is similar as far as I know to CTV plus other things, and it's a little bit more flexible, right? So CTV is like you can build a transaction that can only spend the Bitcoin out to a specific address, right?
mhm, mhm.
And that's basically the fundamentals of it. You can build more complex stuff with it, but that's kind of the core of it. I'm not gonna like I'm definitely not fresh enough on it to like, let's say, give your audience an exposition of CTV and all its trade-offs. I've done a lot of podcasts on it. If you want to go on juangalt.com, there's a bunch of conversations I've had with people on CTV, um, that I think explain it and look at it from different dimensions. But um, think of it like this. You know, this is actually maybe the best metaphor I've heard for why CTV is actually very useful. So In the banking world, you can put spending limits on your own account, right? In fact, banks do that by default on your account, right? But you can change them often. And then the spending limits are like, you can spend $100, $1,000, whatever. But if suddenly like $20,000 move in one transaction, your bank's gonna be like, "Yo, you okay? Did you get kidnapped?" Right? And they have a way to like cancel that transaction and reverse it, right? Because maybe you did get hacked, right? And obviously reversibility is like this isn't exactly reversibility. It's like you can with CTV you could do something like reactive security. So you could have like your Bitcoin in cold storage on a kind of multi-sig, and if the money moves within like 5 blocks or something, you can publish another transaction that cancels it, right? So like I said, there's as the recipient, you got to make sure like that you need to be able to like wait enough blocks before you actually accept the money, right? But like it gives you an option for security, right? And I think that would be that's like one use case that's interesting for self custody, right? Like today, every time you move, okay. So here's another example with Bitcoin. Every time you move Bitcoin on chain, you're moving all of the Bitcoin inside that wallet. Your private keys have the power to move all of the Bitcoin inside that wallet. So let's say you have a full Bitcoin and you're just trying to spend $1,000, right? Well, you are risking the full Bitcoin when you push the send button because you're signing a transaction that moves $1,000 to them and 60 something $1,000 back to you, right? So every time you push the send button, you're risking the whole balance on that wallet. With CTV, you can actually restrict that. You can actually say, no, no, no. This transaction has to send the Bitcoin back to me. Maybe you know what I mean. Like it lets you control that a little bit. I'm doing a really poor case of this. It's actually very
I
difficult
mean, yeah,
to explain, but
Bitcoin already has these
yeah.
scripts like lock times and all that stuff that OpsCTV is leveraged to do this complex stuff. I understand that OpsCTV is very sophisticated, it's very simple in the way that you can add composability to the scripts that already exist on the Bitcoin network. So you can make these structures of transactions and pathways, spending pathways of
Mhm.
different transactions. The what brought up CTV to this discussion that we're having is that when it was proposed to for activation, like people think that it wasn't necessary yet,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that there were too many incentives, wrong incentives involved into the activation, into the people pushing for the activation. So it could be some things that basically, well, in the case of Jeremy Rubin, who was the developer that was mainly pushing for it in 2022, like people were saying like, okay, Bitcoin is not your science project, we are not demanding OpsCTV to be activated immediately. We should take some time to think about it. Like it's not a priority for Bitcoin right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I
So
mean,
I agreed with that. I like Adopt TV for as a way to. I don't know if it is an scaling solution
mhm.
for Bitcoin necessarily, but it's a cool feature and functionality
Mhm.
for Bitcoin. But I agree that I mean, we might not need it right now to fully implement it into the Bitcoin software. So the way that Jeremy um, approached this campaign, it wasn't very well perceived by me and a lot of people that like didn't feel it necessary. So that's where the
But
this
let me provide you a different analysis of that. So like I didn't know anything about Opsy TV when that happened. I actually was also on the maybe hold off, right? However, he had been already like that code, like he like okay, as far as like soft forks, he created the code or open source years ago. Like we're talking like probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. I don't know. It's been a long time. He has done all kinds of education on it. He created like a soft fork version of it to oppose it. So if you didn't like it, you could just run his software to oppose it. He's done like if you come up with standards as to what he should do, he has done more than pretty much anybody else to make sure this is as transparent as possible. And he was getting no traction. And he was getting no traction because it's actually really kind of difficult to get other people to review your code because they're busy with other stuff to do, right? And so I sympathize with his attempt at activating it because it actually brought attention to it, even though it got rejected. And now, 2 years, 3 years later, there's been a lot of conversation about it. And one of the first reactions that people had to it was Antonopoulos saying that you could have like these sort of infinite covenants that could trap Bitcoin forever. That's already been widely debunked and disproven as far as I'm aware, right? Like that's like just not possible with CTV. And so if Andres Antonopoulos had like an adverse reaction to CTV, or maybe didn't read CTV but just reacted to like all covenants in general, then it was actually like an emotional reaction from the community about something they didn't understand. And then Antonopoulos made it sound really scary, and so everybody was like, "Fuck up CTV," right? And that's probably good because it clearly didn't have consensus, right? And so now it's still difficult. Like I'm struggling to like make a case for it. I'm not 100% sure that it'll give us what we need, right? My priority, my value system is I want to be able to scale self-custody to the global south. Most people that are in this conversation are North Americans. They have
Yeah,
first class US dollar bank accounts. I
I
don't.
agree with you on that. That's very important. I mean, self
So like I
custody.
care about self-custody. I care about self-custody. I think self-custody is important. And I understand that it needs to be cheaper and it needs to stay cheaper. And I understand that nothing's free, even freedom. Freedom's not free. So sovereignty is not free. It can't be free. It's gonna always cost something, and there's always gonna be trade-offs. But my interest is in lowering the costs of self-custody and maximizing the like making sovereignty and individual sovereignty as cheap and effective and cost effective as
Mhm.
possible. And so if there is a set of technologies that can let us scale self-custody in Bitcoin, I'm very interested in that.
I think that that doesn't depend from one solution. I think the
Yeah.
future of Bitcoin is gonna be like an integrated network of different solutions working to each other and connecting to each other until
Yeah.
they enable the final user to take self custody into their hands and use on chain in a certain way. Last week we had Killian from Bolt Exchange, and I don't know if you are familiarized with this project. It's basically a Lightning service provider. They do atomic swaps and they enable people to swap Bitcoin on chain and Lightning, and also cross chain. Now they revealed that they're working on the Rootstock integration. They already did with Liquid Network. So they allowed people to swap on-chain Bitcoin or Lightning Bitcoin to different side chains and solutions. So I think the approach that Killian and Bolt Exchange have for the product that they are building is like being a bridge between the main networks that are surrounding Bitcoin. So I think these kind of products are very important because they are being like, the bridge, the connection point that can allow users to swap or jump between the main networks, So I think that's useful for happen with eCash and mint systems as well. And like we were saying in the beginning, you notice it, and I kind of predicted it many years ago for myself. Like all the shitcoins functionality will eventually come into Bitcoin. Like I always saw Bitcoin like a black hole, like an imploding star that with the force of gravity attracts all the little small uh, all the galaxies that are around. So of course I'm not a fan of doing this on chain on the software, on the main software, Bitcoin software. As I said, I think you should have a minimalistic approach for it, but I also think that it's inevitable to have all these altcoins or alternative network functionalities in a certain way pegged into Bitcoin, like Rootstock does. Rootstock is a sidechain that use a mechanism
Mhm.
for to the like name pegged mining, and they try to do it in the more similar way to the Bitcoin mining, but they integrated the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, into the own network. So that's an approach that other networks are being replicating in their own way. This could be the case also for BitVM. I mean, it's slightly different because BitVM doesn't have a blockchain, but it's an outsider. It's a software that works on their own reality, on their own realm, and pegging to Bitcoin to consolidate the transactions and the states of
Mhm.
UTXOs and transactions. So I think that will be the reality for Bitcoin in the future. And I just don't want to see people taking sides in a polarized way because, like I said, these bridge services are necessary to connect these two sides of the
Yeah, I mean,
debate
I
of
think
the
that's
software
that might be
solution.
where we end up. Like rootstock is cool, but like it's got some points of centralization. Their whole design was to be able to become kind of like merged mined into Bitcoin, and they need certain software upgrades in order to really, leverage Bitcoin's trust minimization or decentralization.
Mhm.
And Bitcoin just hasn't made those upgrades, and so rootstock is kind of a semi-centralized thing, right? And so are all the other solutions, and maybe or most of them, right? I think Lightning is the purest layer too, because you have unilateral exit into Bitcoin. You can actually exit without permission from third parties, and so
Well, I think that the Lightning trade-off are bigger than Roostocks, in my opinion. I mean, the centralization of Lightning is very big. I mean, it's not too censorship resistant in theory.
well, I mean, if you're using Phoenix, for example, right? I'm a big fan of Phoenix. You have 12 words. The worst thing that Phoenix could do is refuse to relay your own transactions, and then you just grab the 12 words, put them into Electrum, and wait a couple weeks and move your money out. So that's unilateral exit, right? You're actually still standing on Bitcoin consensus. You're not standing on rootstock consensus, right?
Yeah, but
So
because Lightning is
I don't have
really
anything against rootstock. I mean, if that's the way we have to like scale, and those are the trade-offs we have to take, then so be it. But that's kind of what I'm trying. That's what I'm resisting. I'm resisting that. I'm not. I don't want to surrender self custody quite just
Yeah,
yet.
the challenge of Lightning is this: the self custody. Like, how do you run a node or make every user to run a node and manage
Yeah,
channels,
you're not gonna
open
get
and
that.
closing it? That's a trade.
I've never run a Lightning node. I've never tried to manage liquidity because it's insane to expect
I
users to do
w-
that. And
I
so,
wouldn't.
but again, Phoenix, right? Phoenix is the canary here. You can do self custody on the client side, and you can run a Phoenix server that uses their Lightning secure service provider to manage the channels, and then you can receive Lightning payments without having to manage liquidity. So it is possible. They're fantastic engineers. They've built out a full stack of Lightning software to be able to get to that point. So they're like years ahead of everybody else. But it is possible. But I get it. Like if you have to manage liquidity, you've lost the thread. Like I say, as an end user, you can't expect end users to manage liquidity.
No, no, that won't happen. I wouldn't try to run a Lightning node
Yeah.
myself. I work with teams in companies and projects that we basically have dedicated technicians to manage the balance of our channels. So I know I've seen that burden very close
Yeah.
in my experience. So that's not feasible or probable for the end user. So yeah, what I like about Lightning is like it's still Bitcoin. It's basically Bitcoin. Maybe had another layer of communication between nodes, or another kind of protocol over it, but it's not that
Hmm.
difficult to you're still using Bitcoin and UTXOs and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So that's what I
Yeah.
like about it, and I think that's a big part of its network effect
Hmm.
that it had since 2018. Like people were okay, this is a middle way solution because you're still using Bitcoin, and maybe you're sacrificing centralization and self custody, but you are getting cheaper and faster transactions. So that's what's going to happen in any case with any sidechain and any L2 solution. That you have to make trade offs and
Hmm.
sacrifice little things, or maybe not sacrificing it directly, but maybe exposing to another type of risks in the future, like in the case of CTV. Like, I mean, the scripts can be proved, and you have all these years of research and testing, but that doesn't guarantee that someone could create a certain type of transaction cycle that end up burning a significant amount of bitcoins
Yeah,
like
the
that.
thing is, we can already burn Bitcoin, and we can already lock Bitcoin in a multi-sig. Like all the ETFs, their Bitcoin is on Coinbase. Coinbase can already lock that Bitcoin if the United States makes them. So like you don't need this isn't something that CTV would be unlocking. This is already possible in Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's already possible, but the learning curve, you will have to go through a learning curve with OpsCTV that could happen for anyone using it. That in the
Yeah,
first
I mean,
instance, if you see the bitcoins that were burned at the beginning, most of them were mistakes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean
So
definitely this isn't like for like end users that are not engineers. This is for like software
yeah,
developers building
yeah.
wallets. That's where CTV will
Hmm.
be interesting.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, so you know,
So yeah, that's things that will happen. And I wanted to ask you if you maybe are following another scaling solutions right now beyond besides the ones that we have discussed.
I'm following eCash. I'm following like Fedimints and like Cashew. Um, they're pretty cool. I mean, they have a great privacy and great scalability. They just have no self custody. You know, they just have like this sort of custody trust trade off. And I'm not convinced that a Fedimint that a federated eCash is any better than like a single sig eCash because actually it's still a bunch of people you don't know and have no capacity to influence, and they have a big capacity to influence you. And so and anyway, like with the Fediments, one of the things that I learned about recently is that if one of the key signers decides to quit their job, they have to reset the whole federation right now, which which means like you gotta like cash in everybody's tokens and fucking like a nightmare, right? So like they're probably gonna fix that. That's probably one of the big things they have to fix before they enter production, right? Like you have to be able to rotate keys. It's fundamental in cryptography and digital sort of systems. So you have to be able to rotate the password, without having to like start a new account. It's the same issue with Nostr, right? It's like
Hmm.
everybody's like, go to Nostr, go to Nostr. It's like, bro, what happens if I get hacked or if I lose my password? I can't change my password. So that's the same. It's so this kind of issues they still need to be developed worked out. I think Lightning's pretty great. I mean, I think centralized Lightning, custodial Lightning, like something like Blink or actually works really well if you're in a jurisdiction that protects you. But like we're seeing in Blink, they're now asking for cell phone authentication, or like they're asking for like ID to do more than $1,000 a day, which pretty much prices out most of North America, right? I guess that's fine. Maybe for Latin Americans, that's doable. The global South, that's doable. But like I don't like that. Like I was using Blink, now I'm off Blink. I'm back on Phoenix because like I don't I don't I don't need anybody babysitting my fucking transactions. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, well, I love Blink. For me, it's like a pretty good wallet for
right,
Bitcoin circular economies. All the Galois framework is pretty great. I love
yeah,
that they did open source. But of course, they here in El Salvador, they are a registered financial, I mean, money transmitter company.
right,
So they are subjugated to the regulations and regulators
yeah.
supervising.
And
So
maybe that's
I
the future, right? Most people that don't spend $1,000 a day sometimes, are going to be okay with Blink, right? And that's fine. And maybe that's just the future.
Mhm.
And then Blink will become an international financial institution that's based in El Salvador, and hopefully they can keep those funds secure in that custody. They can custody those funds responsibly, and they probably will, maybe, right? But then people that can are gonna have to use Phoenix, right? And that's fine. And you just got to pay a little bit more to use Phoenix, but that's the cost of of sovereignty, so to speak, right? Or like and that maybe that's just the way that it is, right? And I think that is probably the way that it's gonna go. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't expect everybody to be on self custody. Like, most people just don't give a shit. Like, most people just really don't want that responsibility. They'd rather just somebody else deal with it and daddy government take care of it, and it just has to work. Not everybody needs to be a Bitcoin cryptography
Yeah,
or
I actually
that.
think that the natural inclination for humans is to delegate responsibilities.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
That
it's
happens
it's a division
often.
of labor, right? It's fundamental to capitalism. I get that. So like
Yeah.
my expectation is not that everybody's going to be like super self sovereign, like hardcore. No, but if it gets so expensive that only like major corporations and governments can do it, and multi-millionaires, then like that sucks, right? Like, let's just say this: I want at least the middle class to have self sovereignty, like the middle class of the world, whatever that is, right? Like, at least the middle class should have self sovereignty, right? And then
I
maybe
think
that can flow off to the lower classes, and the richest people already have self sovereignty, to some degree. So like that's nothing new, Nobody's here. Like I think I've seen this a few times. Like, I didn't get into Bitcoin to make rich people richer, Like, I'm trying
mm,
to spread that down, So yeah,
I don't think Michael Saylor is gonna get old enough to see Bitcoin being a unit of account. I
yeah,
think his bet is great. I mean, he's a legend and a good educator about Bitcoin roles as currency based in energy, a new form of gold or whatever. But I still think that he has a responsibility with his investors, and he might still think under a fiat mindset. I mean, his investors do. They want more fiat. They want to get rich in the fiat standard with
mm,
this new form of gold.
hmm,
Like, so that's the reality. I mean, in their defense, you could argue that they don't have enough time to see Bitcoin being a unit of account, so they think this way. I mean, they want to maximize profits at a shorter time. Maybe they have this long-term vision, but still, they want to. I think probably they will be able to find some credit or to issue credit or debt under the Bitcoin they have, so
yeah,
people can take gains out of it of these Bitcoin holds that they have, the holdings that they have.
right.
So I think that will be the answer for much people that ask when he is going to sell the Bitcoin. Never,
Hmm.
never. But he's gonna issue some kind of debt over it while the fiat system exists.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a brilliant strategy. As long as
Yeah,
he doesn't get liquidated, I think that's really smart. So
never liquidated and be able to ask for debt from the government.
right.
it's not like it's not like ethical or completely, but maybe you could see it as an attack on fiat. I don't know.
Hmm.
Like you are leveraging the benefit from both sides, but you still have the high hand because you have the biggest holding of bitcoins, while the
Mm.
government doesn't.
Hmm. Yeah, I
It,
mean, I think, yeah, you could argue that it's a speculative attack on the dollar. You could also argue that it's an NGU, it's a Trojan horsing of Bitcoin. Like the amount of liquidity that has entered Wall Street, the amount of Bitcoin that has entered Wall Street that is on Coinbase now is like huge, right? And then that incentivizes the U.S. government to like clarify their regulations, and the regulations are going to favor the incumbents. So it's going to favor Wall Street. It's going to favor Coinbase. So but on the other hand, you could argue that we're installing Bitcoin deep inside the heart of Wall Street, and we're now incentivizing them to care about Bitcoin because now a lot of them are getting invested. So that's good, right?
and
I think it's
but
just life
they
is very complex, right? I think
this brings
I
other
think we
things,
need to
other
make sure it stays balanced, right? I think we need to be able to, we need to be able to defend ourselves against, like whatever Wall Street shenanigans come our
yeah.
way.
I mean, that's important because even when they start caring about Bitcoin, that has two sides, a good one and a bad one. I mean, they care about the number go up narrative and holding Bitcoin as a form of gold, but they could also get interested into Bitcoin development. And we have
Yeah,
seen that uh, Michael Saylor last week or a couple weeks ago said like Bitcoin didn't need any more upgrades or changes into its software. So that's a very strong position coming from him and being the person that he is, the actor that he is. So that
but did
can
he actually say
influence.
that? Because like that was like an accusation from Odell, and I don't think he's
Exactly,
actually.
that was an accusation from Odell, and the rumors was that he blocked some ETF from founding Bitcoin developers or something like that. Then Jack Dorsey came up and said it was ARK. Like I don't know, it was a pretty strange rumor to be running. But
Yeah,
even talking hypothetically is is worrying. It's worrying. I mean, I'm certain for a fact that they can start worrying about Bitcoin software development and being influential on it.
yeah. I don't know. It would be great to know what actually happened, and
Yeah.
it would be great to get a response out of Saylor, but he hasn't addressed the issue at all. So maybe some journalists will get access to him and get that question in because because it's important, right? Maybe he had some nuance there, like maybe some ETF was like trying to sponsor a consensus change in Bitcoin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And Sailor was like, that's a bad idea, bro. Maybe that's what happened, or maybe Sailor doesn't think that. Maybe Sailor thinks Bitcoin should just completely ossify, and there should be no more changes to it because that'll make sure that his NGU continues to go up without risk, which would be
I
bad.
mean,
Because again, like there's things that because he only cares about number go up. He wants it to be property locked up in a vault. He wants it to be a shiny rock. Clearly, he says like spending your Bitcoin is ridiculous, and he's right from like a pure like money like NGU maximalization perspective. You should never sell your Bitcoin, right? Unless you can more or less trade the market, but like even then it's like retarded, right? So
Michael Saylor definitely benefits from Bitcoin, from how Bitcoin it is right now. He doesn't
yeah,
have incentives to change Bitcoin,
right.
either for the most craziest changes, consensus changes that he could figure out for his benefits. He doesn't have any incentives. Regarding the ETFs pushing for developments or consensus changes, I think that will be like a up leveling or of the the block size wars and all these corporate things that happen. And I mean, the corporations push it for changes, and the block size increase during the block size wars in those years. There will be something like similar to that, but a bigger scale. Now, instead of native Bitcoin companies such as the miners or the Coinbase or all that stuff, you will have like the real guys, the real Wall Street and ETF guys. That
Hmm.
will be interesting to see. Yeah. Another civil war, but with bigger opponents.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that'll happen. It might come. It might just be that they take a position. It might just be that I don't know. It may not happen, but like it may just be that everybody decides, you know what, we can't change this thing, and then we just gotta hack it, and that's gonna be interesting because that's already happening. The reason ordinals happened is because like the guy that created ordinals hasn't even been able to get a BIP number, right? Like a BIP number is like a Bitcoin improvement proposal number that's like a parallel GitHub repo that was like a way we established ways to specify and like create Bitcoin improvement proposals, right? And like the sort of like the core developer side of things, or like let's say the community was not paying attention to that, and Luke Jr., which was one of the only maintainers, was so busy that he couldn't keep up with it, and so like the guy didn't have a BIP number for years, and so he eventually was just like fuck it and just launched it, right? So like clearly there's work to be done to like let's say improve Bitcoin that are like non-consensus, right? And that's being worked on right now. There's a big thread on like how to like getting new people onto the BIP editor list, and it's a big discussion about that, right? So anyway, I think this sort of they're basically going to play out in two ways. If Bitcoin ossifies, then hacking your decided feature into Bitcoin somehow is going to become a trend. It's like we're just going to use whatever we can, whatever we have to build whatever we want, and see it and make the compromises we got to make and just roll with it. And it's going to be ugly engineering, but it'll work in general and it'll be still epic, right? Or we continue to have these conversations and like eventually maybe we find the right software that appeals to enough people, right? I think so Ellen Hands is a package of software tools that would fix a bunch of problems for lightning. It would bring like the sort of reactive security dimension that would make self custody a lot more secure, a lot better. It would improve some things over like multisig. Multisig has some trade-offs that CTV can potentially solve, apparently, right? And then it would and then maybe we just add in there like the filter sort of bug change, that like bug fix that makes ordinals more expensive, and then maybe that's what we need to get consensus, and I would be totally okay with that. If I have to sacrifice JPEGs and Ponzi's on Bitcoin in order to get to scale self custody, I will 100% do that every day. So that's where I'm at. But
I
um
think it's a better approach than the or disrespect of filter that Bitcoin nodes have, because Bitcoin nodes can only filter ordinals from the mempool and the node relay, not actually in the blockchain. They're still accepting blocks that include ordinals. So that would be a better approach. I mean, finding a way to make it more expensive.
I'm just tweeting this out
The,
because that was a great quote.
the inscriptions.
I'm sorry, what was
Uh,
that?
yeah, I was saying that that's a better approach than the or disrespected filter that Bitcoin nodes have, because Bitcoin nodes filter only filters the inscriptions out of the mempool and the node relay,
Hmm.
but they still accepting blocks with
Right.
that includes
Yeah.
the.
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
the
because the
transactions are valid.
blockchain.
So if they get mined by other people, then it's that they're getting through. So
Mhm.
yeah. So I mean,
What do you say this tool, or you say LN hands
Ellen
lightning?
Hands. Yeah, look up Ellen Hands. Big guy on this is Reardon is one of the big characters in that world. Reardon, Ellen Hans. I'll send you a link.
Please.
Yeah, this guy's doing great work on that front. I'll DM you his thing. Um, cool, man. What else are we talking about? I kind of have to go in about 10, 15 minutes max. Um,
Yeah, nowadays it's hard to keep up with all the tools um that are being developed. I got to take a look on the eCash. It was funny because nearby my house I have a cashew tree, and it's right now in the season. The fruit is delicious. I like cashews, and I remember, oh, cashew. I should take a look on that definitely. I know, of course, it has its trade-off. I heard of, but I'm not too aware of it. I
well,
will
it's
look into
custodial.
it.
Flash is entirely custodial. That's the
Okay,
trade.
and there's
But the
no way to
benefit
run.
is that like eCash is very private. Like there is no on-chain footprint. It's just entirely
Hmm.
digital cash, and it's highly scalable. So like it's going to be very cheap. Um, but it's
And
entirely
there isn't a way to run a server.
yeah. You could run your own mint, but then you're custodian other people's funds. So and you have to run a Lightning node.
Well,
Like, fuck that, right?
yeah.
Maybe you can plug in like Phoenix server into it, which deals the channel management and stuff. I don't know. That
I
sounds
mean,
very probably very technically, you know, advanced.
if you can use another person's Lightning node, that could be feasible.
So the way that these eCash systems work is like they'll have like a Lightning node, and then probably below the Lightning node is like some sort of multi-sig or like cold storage, right? And so let's say the cold storage has like 50% of the funds, or like 70% of the funds, and then the Lightning node has 30. And then on top of that, they emit eCash, right? So you deposit Lightning to that, they emit eCash. You have this eCash with a flag, or like a little with, let's say, the ID of that mint. And so like I have a mint and you have a different mint, you know, and I don't trust your mint and you don't trust my mint, but some people trust my mint and some people trust your mint, right? So
Mhm.
somebody like comes
It's
to
based
me
on
with your
reputation.
eCash, right? Somebody comes to me with your eCash and they're like, hey, I want to buy some consulting services from you. And I look at their eCash and it's your mint. And I'm like, well, I don't want to hold their eCash. So I'll just go to your mint, give you the eCash, and you give me Lightning in exchange. And so now I'm settled and I can trade. Um, that's how it works. So it's like it uses Lightning as a settlement layer, but then it uses eCash as a payments layer, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think I had an idea. Maybe because we are running running off of time in this stream.
Right.
It's been so interesting this discussion that it could take hours.
Yep.
But maybe we should discuss like novel L2 solutions and maybe explain it between both of us to the public for the next month. Maybe we can schedule a new stream to diving into eCash and all other scaling solutions. Would you like it?
Maybe, yeah. Let's talk about it. I'm not too familiar with other like L2s yet. I'm kind of keeping an eye on it, but there's just so much to look at
Yeah,
yet.
but maybe we can pick up two or three solutions and discuss it for an hour for our next stream next month,
Yeah, maybe.
and
Let's stay in touch about it and we can figure it out.
do some research about it and try to bring people out to ask us questions.
Right.
And yeah, and learn ourselves about this because it's very interesting, and I think we need to be more aware of this,
Mhm.
all of these solutions to take up informed decisions.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, each one of them is like another world, another reality in itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Awesome,
well,
man.
Juan, thank you for your time. This was, as I say, we could be here for hours,
Hmm.
but I want to finish it. If you like, maybe inviting our followers to whatever you are doing right now, what maybe your consulting services, or if you're publishing anything like a podcast or your reportings, whatever you want
Hmm.
to say, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So, I mean, I have a podcast. You can go get it at juangalt.com. I have a Spanish version of it if you don't speak English. So if you go to juangalt.com, there's like Hablemos de Bitcoin. You click that and it goes to like the Spanish version. And we're going to keep publishing Spanish conversations we've had on that show, on that version of the site. And then, yeah, I mean, if you, I do consulting. I've been teaching people how to self custody for a long time. I think self custody will still be here with us for a few years, and it may actually be here forever. I don't know, right? Like maybe the fees don't actually go up that much, and they just kind of like oscillate. And so that's a possibility. So I help people to set that up. I help people like I'll have a conversation with anybody in a consulting session about anything they're curious about in the world of Bitcoin. So um yeah, you can find me at juangalt.com or follow me on Twitter and reach out if you think I can help you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share the links here. I hope I get it right. Juangal.com, and of course without the majors. But I think I found your YouTube channel is Juan S. Galt,
Yes. I don't really
right?
publish there anymore, but yeah, that's I have a YouTube channel somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, but where are you publishing your podcast?
It's on Spotify, it's on Fountain app, it's on all the major apps except iTunes. We'll probably get it on iTunes soon.
Okay, well, share the link with us, and we'll be happy to share on
Yeah.
our socials. Well, thank you again. This was Talks with Saro, Money on Chains with Juan Galt. Uh, for all those that doesn't know us, we are a Bitcoin backed stablecoin protocol. You're free to use our DApp on moneyonchain.com or hellomog.io. Uh, Remember that any question that you have, you can ask us either on Twitter, on our Telegram channel and group for our community. We'll be happy to help. We have a team of, seasoned Bitcoiners and seasoned badgers of money on chains that will be happy to help you on how to use dollar on chain and the different assets that we have, how to convert to other chains and to Bitcoin. And we're here to help. So remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check the other episodes that we have either in English and Spanish. And this is it. Thank you, Juan. See
Thanks, man.
you.
Appreciate it.
We'll try to see you next month to discuss all these fun scaling solutions that are around here.
Yeah, man. Let's stay in touch. Take care, dude.
Take care. Be well. Bye.